everything that we did, we came up with. So it was our own poetry, and then we got our poetry, read it to each other, shared it, talked about ideas of what it means to us, different topics and different things. We talked about love for like 2 hours, and we never figured it out. And so we had it, and then we got into a room and we just started moving. And what you saw tonight was kind of little pieces of, we were like, ooh, that feels right for this, or oh yes, that really feels like what it feels like when you're in love, or that really feels like what my voice feels like, and different things like that. So another reason why we were interested in doing a talkback is because it's our honors project. So this is kind of an experiment for us to be like, did people get it, or what did they get? Because many of these things we were like, well, it means, like us even, different, each piece means something completely different to me than it does to her, and different things will mean different things to different people. So it was kind of something we were interested in, and also if you want to know about our process or want to know about any specific piece or what we were thinking a piece was about or a story that it brings up for you, then this is kind of an open place to speak about. So that's the thoughts.
I mean, I think you guys kind of started this process while we were all in Moscow last year. But I'm wondering how long in the making this whole thing has been.
Well, that's a good question. We actually, it was, you were close. It was kind of the semester before, so spring of sophomore year.
Which were seniors.
Right, so spring of sophomore year when we were working on the cherry orchard and we were doing A-tunes, we were like, this is nifty. We are into this. And then we started realizing that each other wrote poetry, and we started reading it to each other. And because we were freaked out about it, we're like, this is so scary, like sharing poetry with people. And we're like, oh, you do poems, I do poems. Let's have a poetry swap.
We're like, I'm not a professional, neither am I. Okay, here I go.
I remember in the lobby of the students building, like huddled and like
Like
whispering poetry because like anyone else here, and so that was one of the scary parts of this. But yeah, so spring of sophomore year, we started talking about an idea for a show, and then Moscow really opened it up movement-wise because we did a lot of movement work there. And then when we got back in the spring, we started really like meeting and working on physical things in the spring to keep things from Moscow, you know, and experiment with them. And then over the summer, we sent each other like pictures and letters and poems and things, and like, kind of ideas. And then once we got back this fall, we really hit hard and really started shaping it and exploring it.
It's funny the way it worked too, because a lot of the things that came up, like, I know for me at least, of the ones I wrote, only 1 or 2 I wrote a long time ago, and the rest, you know, there's only a few, but a couple of them have been written in the past week or 2. And that was something that we kind of realized, well, the reason we made this was for us to be able to say what we think and feel about different things, and if something comes up, even if it's not like perfect, or it's not, you know, what it could be or something, or we didn't figure out love, we decided to put flaws and put in our imperfections because that's part of us exploring it. So
I'm really curious, especially since these are older pieces and you put it together yourselves. Is there anything that didn't get in? Like any poems maybe that, see that's not that.
yeah.
Like any something you practiced didn't get in, like a poem that was like, this is nice, but we didn't do it.
The ending, the future. We explored the future, the idea of like moving forward into the future. We explored that a lot, and we did like an hour or so or 2.
We did like 2.5 hours
of the future, and we did a lot of things, but somehow the simpler was better. The idea of just moving forward, and it's just that constant. So that was one. That's one that jumps out to me in terms of one that we actually kind of developed and then didn't really use because it just didn't fit anymore.
in terms of poetry, like there were many poems that, you know, a year ago or at the beginning of the semester when I was like, oh, I really like this poem, this poem, this poem, this poem. And I was like, great, we're gonna use these. And then the first ones we worked were actually the one with the blindfold, the voice one, and For the first two we worked, and we realized certain things really didn't work anymore. And like I had written a piece because I was fortunate enough to get the Forward Together Forward scholarship last year, and met all the families and really wanted to do a piece honoring them, but realized that that was such a huge thing to do that it needs to be its own project. So that would be a project I knew it was great, because it was something that we were like, this is.
It was hard to let go of though, because we really both liked the idea of doing something to honor the victims of the shooting, and we both aimed about it, and we had other artists to collaborate with from other departments, and we were excited about that. But as we went on, we realized it didn't belong in this piece, and so we hope to develop that, in the future. But yeah, that was kind of hard to let go of, but it just didn't fit.
We realized we couldn't do it justice and do this piece justice when they were the same thing. So being two completely separate things, thank you. Then we could work each thing and really develop each thing as its own separate thing and do justice to both of them. That's the idea. Yeah.
I was curious about the voiceover interludes that you had between scenes and the voiceovers. Like what were they like answering questions, or like what were they like?
Yeah.
What were they saying?
The idea of it being an exploration of 4 years in college, being a huge transition time that we're all going through at this university. And every university, and it's this season of life that is so transforming, and we're all going through it together, but sometimes we feel so isolated, even though everyone around us, all the other students and everyone who's older has gone through it, and we shouldn't feel so alone, but we do sometimes. And we thought the voiceovers were a nice way of getting the sense that, like Caitlin says, a sea of voices, and ours are just two. And that's what yes, we wrote questions about, like, what do you think love is? What's your most embarrassing memory in college? What's your most heartbreaking memory? What's your funniest story? What are you afraid of? Things like that. And we just wanted to get the sense of, like, this is not just two people. This is like very human. And everyone we talked to, all the interviews were just full of things that were like, yes, that's exactly what we did in that piece, and yes, that's exactly, and it's like, oh, we just share all this, although there's a lot of things that people have in common.
We had talked about like why we're doing it, because we, especially having it be our own poetry and our own movement, that we were like, we don't want this to be selfish and self-indulgent and have a piece that is about us and for us and we want to feel like, look at me. And so we had talked about, we both felt we wanted and needed to do this piece, but we didn't quite know why. And so then we figured out that it's because all those things we feel, like Christie said, how many of us have felt alone when there's thousands of people who are all around us all the time that are going through the exact same thing as us, and having the same feelings and thoughts or the exact opposite. And so there's so many people that are just like us and are completely different, and we wanted to kind of encompass more than just the two of us, that this was this big sea and then it's just two seeds coming out of it. But when you put it together, it's bigger than just us.
Also, like, one other thing about that is that I just feel like in this day and age, it's so hard to find places where people can actually come together and be in each other's presence and like witness each other and see each other and listen to each other's stories. And I just think that's so precious. And we wanted to sort of get the conversation flowing and get the stories flowing. And when we're telling our stories, when people in the interviews are telling their stories, it's everyone telling their stories. And there's that sense of when one person tells their story, it's like everyone tells their story. I mean, because we share so much,
It's like we were talking about pretty much every piece. It was like, these are just things that, especially as college students, you're like, I want to have friends, so I probably shouldn't go around saying what I really think about love. So we were saying, or what I'm really afraid of, because those aren't things that you just go up to someone on the street and talk about.
yeah.
So,
And eventually we sometimes even lose the ability to articulate what we think love is or what we're afraid of. And so it just becomes this confusing and frightening thing because you can't talk about it, or don't talk about it, so.
Which is why we also felt like maybe with movement, we could feel in our bodies what it feels like differently. Yeah, so using a different language essentially.
That piece that came after the theater, what the stories about, voiceovers about fear in that, the piece was
Yeah.
after the theater from that. What was it about?
The one, the last time, where we done it?
No, not the last one, the one where I was
Like the
ready
door.
for the
I
door,
had to go pull it up.
the black one.
That's where really, for me, it was about sort of escapism, and I think it's really tragic, but a lot of young people, a lot of people, especially a lot of young people, start drinking or start. No, I just think a way of coping with fear and with uncertainty and with the fear and vulnerability that comes from growing up is you escape into different things, alcohol, books, even, you just escape into this thing that steals away your identity because you're too afraid to. I feel like that's a really common experience. A lot of people have, but the means are different, but the escapism is the same because you're running away from what you're afraid of.
Yes, and we were also talking about how kind of culture in college that it's not only accepted but expected that people will get blackout drunk on weekends and like every weekend. And one of the signs of alcoholism is that you black out.
Right.
And yet within our culture here and at universities that it's like
It's so casual, it's almost strange if you don't, I don't remember anything, I blacked out. Like, that's actually a big deal if you drink so much that you black out. That is so bad for you, and it's a sign of alcoholism. But it's so casual, and it's so, like, I don't remember, I blacked out, or, that we don't think, we think that's a sign of a deeper, it's a symptom of a deeper problem, of this escapism, this pressure.
And people, we both had talked about and felt it, like neither one of us are perfect or have never had a drop of alcohol. We're both over 21, I know that. But we feel like this isn't a conversation that happens even. So people don't really make a choice, they just jump in. And then all of a sudden you don't know how you got there, but you're falling. And the person who you were doing it to impress is fine, and you're not. And situations just like that are so common that it's terrifying. And also realizing, like for myself, if I get upset about something, I'll bury myself in a book. I'll bury myself in a book, and I'll study and I'll study and I'll study, and I won't actually deal with what's going on. And that's the same escapism as drinking alcohol, and it's the same escapism as you can do a million things to escape. And so after we did a movement session, we were talking about it. We were like, what are all the ways that people escape? And it was just the list went on and on. So.
Yeah. So as you were pulling this project together, kind of thinking about what the final product would look like, I was just wondering if there were any sort of discrepancies or disagreements between the two of you, and kind of how you worked through that.
Go ahead.
I don't know. Not really. I feel like we've been working together for 4 years, and the other day we were getting our headshots taken, and this woman asked if we were sisters. She's like, "Oh, are you guys sisters?" And I was like, "Kind of." And I was not trying to be funny. I was like, I didn't feel like I could honestly say no, but I couldn't honestly say yes. So I was like, kind of. We kind of are. But that said, like, I think we really, when you're working in collaboration, it's so, I know it's such a soundbite, but it's such a give and take. Like, you have to let go of certain things because they don't fit, or you have to insist on certain things because you can tell it's the right thing. But I feel like there was a kind of a common vision somehow that we could both agree on.
It was interesting because we had to write proposals for the started, and we started writing them and realized that we like had a meeting after we had come up with ideas, and we had all the same ideas. And so it was kind of interesting, but along the way, it was sometimes difficult to, especially if, I wrote this poem 2 years ago, and now it's changing, or now the words are changing, or now it's no longer mine, it's ours. And so once, at least for me, I know, once I accepted that it was kind of morphing, and that also the fact that we can have two completely different experiences as we're moving together, and once I accepted, like, her story doesn't have to be my story too, then it was easier to let go, because it's not like we did like, oh, this is the choreography that it would be. We just started moving. So then listening to each other and playing off each other, I could still do what I felt was right, and she could still do what she felt was right, but genuinely react off the other. And it's different. I mean, it's pretty much the same every night, but we find new things and new moments every night. Like, last night we didn't hold hands as we were walking forward in the beginning. We just walked forward. We've never held hands until tonight, but it felt right, so we did it. And it's part of at least I think it's part of the beauty that of this type of work, is that we have a structure and we know what we're going to do, but little things like a hug versus pushing someone away can happen because you just have to respond off the other person and keep going. And it makes it terrifying and it makes it exciting.
It's live theater. It's live because it's just a structure, but you're alive with hands.
This is a roundabout way of answering.
Perfect, thanks.
Obviously, in this semester, especially with our class, we've been doing a lot of the like, who are you? What is your personal identity? And that's like been this whole semester in our classes. I'm just kind of curious how much of this was affected by that, or like how different of a beast is this now than it was in like September?
These two and two of us are part of the senior BFA acting class, and right now we are, what they're talking about is that we're going through taking headshots and making film reels and things like that. And we have to know our type and what we can realistically be cast as and what we exude to people, because that's the type of characters we'd be playing. It's what we actually are in real life. And so it's been a lot of self-identifying and being like, oh, I do this, and whether you like it or not, that's what you do. So that's what she's talking about. That's a good question. That is a good question.
Yeah. Short answer, yes, it has affected. Long answer, how exactly? Subtle ways, here and there. I feel like, it is a reflection of the last 4 years and how much we've changed and all the things we've gone through.
I think that more so even than the actual who am I thing, for me it was kind of a realization that I know nothing about anything. And we talk a lot about it in class, that acting and theater and life is like climbing a mountain, and you reach the top of the mountain and then you realize there's another bigger mountain in front of you. And it's just that constant, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, and you just always keep learning. And I think that was something that was really huge for me, because I was terrified of this show, and terrified to say my words and say what I really think and what I really feel in front of people, and somehow repeat it every night like it's the first time I've said it, but they really are my words. So everything changes, and it's a constant reminder of how little I know about anything. So that's what it was for me.
For me, it did teach me a lot about myself, and just that like something would pop up and the way Caitlin and I would react to the same thing in such different ways. I was like, oh, that's me. That's my type. That's how that fits into the picture of me. As opposed to, because you would assume like, oh, everyone reacts to that, like with disgust. And she's like, ooh, and I'm like, ugh. And so there's some of that, like, oh, oh, I see, that fits into me, I see, that fits into the me box, you know, this reaction. And so the me box is like more defined now. I mean, it's complicated, but some reactions to certain things, compared to the same thing or reaction, you know, everyone's so different. Wait, did you have a hand?
I did.
And did you?
This is my first talk back ever, which is kind of fun, and I think it's neat. We don't normally get to do this with people performing, so fun. One of the things I just thought was this is a good reflective project that maybe everybody should do. Maybe not quite in this format, but the end of school, like what is going on, how we express these years, and also just in the future, like, the two of you, in another 4 years should come and do this again. With the 4 years experience that you've added to your life.
It's funny that you say that because somebody last night told us the exact same thing. we were like, I was thinking about it.
And then the other thing I was wondering, that whole idea of terror and like, it seems like you express it by the fall and going down and just I guess the question is for you guys as you're looking towards the end of school, is that kind of the excitement in terror? Is that kind of
Yeah.
where you're feeling?
We talked a lot about that, about how, at least we've been getting the feeling that excitement and fear are almost the same thing, and that they feel the same in your body, and they give you the same reactions to things, and there comes a time where I'm like, I don't know which one I'm feeling. I think it's both of them at the exact same time, and they're one and the same. So yeah, it's so exciting to be going to a new place and new things, but it's also really scary because it's like, we're real people.
Yeah, it's scary too in the way that like you can think about skydiving and you're like, oh, I'm going skydiving in 2 weeks, and then oh, I'm going skydiving, I'm in a plane about to jump out. Like all of a sudden it's like a billion times more real and immediate, and that's kind of like this semester for us is like, oh, we're about to jump out of the plane, as opposed to like, we're going skydiving soon, like that feeling of like your toes curling over the edge of the cliff, you're like, ah, ah, ah. But like she said, excitement and fear are so linked. Sometimes it's just a matter of consciously deciding to treat it as excitement because you're ready and it's going to be fun. So just don't give in to that thing,
And part of the other thing that, especially with opening this show, and just the fear of that, is knowing that it's okay to feel fear. That being fearful of something doesn't mean that you have to do something specific because of it. I just keep saying, like, as we were opening in a week till, and 2 days till, and a day till, and then the day we opened, I just kept saying, I'm so scared, I'm so scared, I'm so scared. And then inside the little cabinet today, literally right before we opened, I was like, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared. But voicing it and saying it and being okay with being scared is, I think, something that I've learned in the past 4 years, is that what makes you strong isn't pushing, it's allowing, and it's strength in vulnerability rather than strength in a solid rock.
Yeah, and I think a symptom of our culture and our generation in this day and age, and maybe just humanity in general, is that we don't want to feel negative things, so we block them out. But when we do that, we cancel out our capacity to feel positive things. Like we cancel out fear. I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel the pain. I don't want to feel the fear. But then you can't feel the joy. You can't feel the happiness because you've blocked off. You've numbed yourself, and so allowing yourself to feel the fear is just the price of feeling, actual joy. And so I think you can't just say, I just want to feel the good things, because it doesn't work like that. You have to go through it all. You have to go through the fear and the pain in order to go through.
And closing the door doesn't mean it's gone. It just means it's behind a door. So that's a weird. Well, the fear's over there. You close the door. It's on the other side. It's still there. I sometimes speak in metaphors.
Anything else? Any other questions?
Okay. Oh, you didn't have to say it that way.
That's who you are.
No, I'm just thinking like, I probably have to take it from a kid's perspective like that, or from someone not in theater at all. But like, what, because you've written poetry your whole life, and you probably have also, Christie. Like, what did the movement do to your poetry? Did it change it? Did it deepen it?
Yes.
And then how would you kind of guide somebody else to do that writes?
I think the way, at least for me, the way it changed was I realized certain words were wrong and that there were better words for what I was saying. Like yesterday, I changed the last line of the first poem I speak because it used to be I'm afraid of love and I'm afraid I will never find love. But as I was doing it, during this week, I realized that it's not I'm afraid I will never find love, it's I'm afraid I will never feel love. Yeah.
She changed it that night, and I like
Opening night, I was like, that's not right. Say the right thing. So then I said the right thing. So yeah, I think, and feeling it, and because it's no longer living on a page. It's living in your body, and then you can feel it with your whole body, and saying the words if they sound like a lie, then they're not right. If they sound too technical and they start going up into your brain, then they're not right. That it lives somewhere deeper inside, and so the word feel love versus find love lived deeper within me. So it was things like that, and then also working with Christie and realizing that, oh, this poem isn't just about this thing, it also has this within it. And so it's like some things that were darker all of a sudden started getting more laughter because she found it funny, or I found it terrifying, or vice versa. And so, so then going back and being okay with rewriting it, and being okay with, okay, it wasn't perfect before, it's not perfect now, I'm just going to change it, and it's never going to be perfect, it's just going to keep going. And so it kind of took on a life of its own in many ways, which is also why my poems are so much longer than Christie's, because I can't ever find the right words to say, so I just keep talking. So that was another thing that I found. It was like, oh, it's just interesting in the difference in our two voices, and the difference in not just our reactions to things, but literally the way we experience them and the way we voice them is very different.
I think we talked about the idea of translating the poems into movement, like as if from one language to another. And I don't know how many of you have experience with the second language, but there are words in the other language that fit something perfectly that aren't in English, or vice versa. And so that kind of happened when we translated the poems into movement and vice versa. Because we sort of treated it like, now we're translating it into movement, now we're translating it back into poetry. So you take the same kernel, the same idea, the same sensation, experience, how do I describe that? Well, you could start to kind of move, like, how does it feel? Or you could be like, I feel so anguished, you know? And so you can, in the one language, sometimes there are more vivid ways to say it through movement, and sometimes there are more vivid ways to say it through writing, and it was interesting to explore that difference.
Yeah, because also, it's something we talked about in Russia, like, we studied abroad in Russia last year, all of the juniors in the acting program do, and it was so interesting because they didn't have a word for, was it privacy? And so they didn't have it. And so
like that's very telling.
Yeah, and it was like if the word doesn't exist, the concept doesn't exist. And how many things can we feel and not say, but we just have a thing that we do, and that's how we get it out. And so that was another idea, was that to awaken more within what is possible within poetry. If there is no word to describe something, it doesn't exist, and we wanted to bring those things to life.
In our movement class, I feel very, very, how many times, like, I've done that so many times where you can't, like, I feel very, very, and there isn't the word, but now this other language just adds more to your vocabulary, kind of, like, here's how I can describe it through motion, you know?
really, really appreciate. Last night we didn't have a talk back because no one stayed except my mom. People were so
She
I'll
talks
talk to you after.
Yeah, people were like,
That's why
"Like,
the
do we
poems are
still have
long."
any questions?" I'm like, "No, no,
I
there's
was like, that's okay, you don't have to ask questions. But we really appreciate it, and we really appreciate you coming.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you so much. Since we wanted to do it, but then we also are having it be our honors capstone program, which means it's kind of, it's an experiment in
It's just like,
itself.
okay,
Actually,
Because I
it's
said
helpful for us to
I'm trying to
gather
move, dude.
feedback. Like, even if you don't have questions, it's helpful for us to just hear some of your impressions.
Yeah, and also to see like what is unclear or what people are wondering afterward and things like that is really interesting to us. We didn't get to do it the first night, but the second night it was really cool because it's like people are like, oh, I saw this on this one particular thing. Like in every different piece, the two of us have completely different ideas of what it's about. So if the two of us have different ideas of what it's about, clearly everyone who sees it are gonna have different ideas. So it's interesting for us to be able to kind of talk about it and things like that. Yeah. So if anyone has any questions or would like to say anything?
I have a wonderment.
Yes.
So, how and in what way did you make decisions about silence, voice, and vocal non-word sound?
Here.
Oh, I'll start. Well, in terms of separating the poem from the movement that's about the poem, one of the things we wanted to do was see if we could take the kernel, the seed of what the poem was about, the essence of the poem and the journey of it, and take away the words and see what was left when we put it into motion. And so the idea of having the words be separated, like to explore the poem without words, essentially, to explore the spirit of it through motion. So we separated out the words purposefully. The verbal or the nonverbal sound, our voice teacher or our movement teacher and our advisor talked to us about, allowing the possibility of sound at all times, so that, if you're pushing something or if you're, that the possibility of sound always exists, and if it comes out of you, then that's what we wanted. That you're not like making nonverbal sounds, so to speak, but you're allowing them to happen if they do.
So it's kind of like it's also it made it so much more like dangerous and exciting too, to be like, okay, well I might scream at any point and like you just have to go with it, or like I might say like something might come out of my mouth at any point and we just have to keep going.
That's Patricia's words.
Yeah, that's who.
For those of you who know her.
Figured it out who it was. But that also it frees your body up so much more when you're allowing sound. So a lot of the poems themselves. Sorry, I'm a little like the poems
It was
themselves.
different tonight.
It was very different.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Last night.
Finish your thought.
No, sorry, finish
Oh no, I was just gonna say we were also talking about how if you show the poem before the movement, then people have an idea going in what it's gonna be about.
Yeah, instead
So-
of figuring out what are they exploring in this, and then hearing the poem and being like, oh, that's what that was.
We're like, oh, I got this, not that.
Like, I didn't, like, some people were, we experimented when we were developing it, whether to have the poems first or second or during, and the person who visited and watched said it was really interesting to have it afterwards, because then you could watch the movement section, try and figure out what was happening, and then hear the poem, and then it would, instead of just, oh, I know what this is about, and I'm watching it play out, Oh, sure.
Do you wanna go first?
There was some hostility tonight that wasn't there last night. Last night was much more tender, I felt. I don't know
Last night was much more like we were like,
if, we were clinging to each other for dear life last night, like, Fred, hug me. And tonight it was more like,
well, one, it was like, that hostility element was like, I didn't, like, for example, at the last one, the one where we jump off at the end, when we're up on top of there, like last night she jumped up and I like brought her into my arms and
we
hugged her.
hugged immediately.
But tonight I was like, I don't want to touch you.
No, tonight's like, I don't know if I trust you.
But I definitely didn't trust her at all, and I was like,
Yeah.
I don't want to touch you. No.
Yeah, but see, it changes a lot night to night. And the first night was different from both of those. So, and who knows what it'll be tomorrow.
Also, like the amount that the audience changes the piece because we are speaking directly to them so much that like tonight, like everyone was silent.
Yeah.
And it became so much more serious
Yeah.
in many places. Like the first night there was a lot of laughter and it became much more comedic.
And the second night was a much more like sentimental, and I felt like supportive.
Yeah.
Like the audience was like, "Aw," and we were like, "Aw," and tonight the audience was like,
Yeah, it was very much like we are watching this show and we were like, okay. So then like I felt like I was in this like weird like aquarium where everyone was watching at that point, and it was like I don't remember the last hour and it feels like I just woke up and it's very strange right now.
I had an interesting experience. I did fall asleep in the cabinet.
Today?
Before the show. I fell asleep. No, it's before we're in the houses when we're waiting in the cabinets where people are coming in, and I was like, I hope I don't fall asleep. And I was like, and then I heard Bethany Magna, and I'm like, and I was like, oh geez.
On the recording.
And so it was an interesting, because like what we wanted to do with this piece partially was kind of consciously explore the subconscious. And so I was like, it was, and during some of our rehearsals, I would like fall asleep just for like 5 minutes and then wake up, and it feels very weird because you've been like, yeah, not like for a long time, just like for a second you kind of fall asleep and then wake up. We rehearsed early in the morning, but I thought it was, in some ways it was kind of interesting because it's like you dip into the subconscious and then you jolt back out of it, and some of those things that come out of that are interesting.
It was weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, it felt like the subconscious tonight.
Yeah, it did. It
Like
did.
it was like we were dreaming.
Ego id.
It did seem like a dream state.
There's
Yeah.
like drunk. Like
The whole time? Or just-
a lot of it.
Yeah,
It's like,
the part
we
where-
were in some other place.
Yeah.
It was cool. It was
Yeah.
cool.
The
I'm saying-
unfocused kind of element where she was just like, it was a contrast.
I felt like we were really different tonight.
Oh,
We were
yeah.
different forces, and
Oh, yeah.
sometimes we're like
We are one.
we are one, and we're like exploring ourselves in each other because we're so similar. And tonight it was not that; it was exploring someone really different.
Yeah. Like I felt like I was dreaming and there was this weird creature that I was like,
You know, and I felt like I was dreaming, and there was this like person,
above.
yeah, and I was like,
How would you help someone to be able to do that?
do what?
Like, speak in movement instead of the word.
Like explore themselves through movement or
You know, it's a really like that's kind of I feel like that's the journey that we're on. You guys are on, and we're we've been going through for the last couple of years. It's really challenging because like at first I was extremely resistant. I had a lot of physical like inhibitions and very self-conscious, and I remember during freshman year, second semester, Patricia's movement class, I would journal things like, this is the hardest class I've ever taken in my life. Like, I'd rather write a paper that's so much more safe to me, but it's a huge gift once, it takes a time to open that up, that willingness to explore physically but once you do, it's really rewarding, but it does take a long time, I feel like, or for some people it takes a long time, for me it took a long time to open up that side of me.
yeah, I mean I think it's a gradual, like it's not just like, oh, now I'm open. It's like a gradual, like I thought I was open but I wasn't, and then I thought I was open again but I wasn't. Oh, there's this other, like it's the same thing as learning anything, I feel like. But in terms of like moving, mainly what we go is like whatever you want, like don't stop your body to do anything it wants to do.
Yeah.
Because like we were doing, like we would read the poems and talk about what it was about, and at least for me, like I know I felt at the beginning that I was like, oh, I have to stay true to the poem, I have to stay true to the poem. But then after a while, it was like, whatever.
Yeah.
We're moving for 2 hours. Like, we're gonna find something.
Exactly.
And like, as soon as that happened, then we started finding things.
Yeah.
And so it's like, then you let your body go to do whatever it wants to do.
Exactly, and we read the poems and discussed the poems before, so they were in us. And so we didn't have to be like, I'm true to the poem, I'm true to the poem. It's like, they're in us, we just have to let our bodies do what they want to do because the poem is in. We talked about it for the last half hour. We've read it a couple times out loud, we dropped it in. Now it's time to just let your body do whatever it wants to do. And if it's something unexpected, it's like, that's not what the poem's about. Like, maybe it is and you just didn't realize.
Yeah, yeah. And
Maybe
like,
love is a struggle instead of like a la la la.
yeah. And that was one thing that was so interesting about Love, was because we had done movement work on it for like a few hours, and we finished our rehearsal because we had to leave, and we were like, we have no idea.
Did we figure out love?
Not at all. Not at all. And it was like, we were like,
Are we
maybe
maybe
that's
more
the-
clueless than we were before?
Yes, yes, definitely. was like just like throwing things everywhere and then spinning and then feeling like we were gonna puke and then like just like thing after thing after thing after thing that it was like, oh no, this is love, oh no, this is love, oh no, this is love. What? Nothing. I don't know. And like, so it was so confusing. And that's what was so interesting about it too, is just allowing, not just the movement, but allowing ourselves to accept whatever was happening.
Yeah, and to not judge it and be like, that's not what love's about. I shouldn't be struggling or I shouldn't be angry, you know. And
Yeah.
just be like, that's how it is.
Especially if like, she's clearly gonna do something different than like I'm gonna do. So I remember times when she would just like lay down on the ground and I was like, get up,
I'd
get
be
up.
like,
And we were like running around and trying to pull her up and I'm like,
I know. That part where I was laying on the ground under the clothes and she was running around, I was like, that is so, that just shows how different we are. Because that's like my response to love. And this is like, and I'm just like two different people. Yeah. It's fascinating.
Did you read your own poems? Like, were you the one to speak your own? Or?
For the most.
for the most part, yeah. The one that we actually, the one that where we read it by candles was I wrote, but we spoke it together.
Yeah.
And
And
then-
the last one we wrote together, so we spoke together in the voiceover.
The last one you wrote together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
We were wondering if we could go from movement to words. So we started with movement on that one. So we were like, we really want to have one that's both of ours to end with.
I kind of wish we had more things.
I
And
know.
it's sort of since it was the last thing, it was kind of, it kind of came to, I that's one thing that I feel like wasn't as explored as the poetry and movement to poetry.
Yeah, that's true.
It was less, I mean, it was still interesting just to dip our toe in it, but it was
Yeah.
kind of not ran out of time, but.
It was interesting because I feel like we could have, like, yes, there are so many possibilities when it comes to movement and with words. Because, like, you can choose a million different words and you can't really describe what you felt when you're moving. So it's like, it lives in this very irrational, like irrational dream-like state with the movement. And then trying to put those into words, I'm always like, I don't know. It felt like, yeah, like I was like, it felt like I was in a fog and like I'm going toward it, and she's like, no, it's around me, and so we kind of, and then we were like, wait, this sounds really like hoity-toity, because sometimes like the future is just ridiculous. It's like, oh, I'm being an idiot. Like, so trying to figure out exactly how to put like 3 hours of movement into a poem and into words that say something about it was so interesting.
Yeah.
Like we had ended up doing this thing where we were like stuck against the wall and growing up the wall and then falling off the wall and crawling.
That was cool,
And
actually.
then the same thing.
And we were doing it together, we were like going up the wall. That was cool. I kind of treated these lessons.
I know, like there's
There
a
were a lot of
cool
things.
things.
Did you just do random like movement improv when you were exploring these?
Yeah, pretty much.
poems?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's like we always just started like by reading the poem and discussing it, or reading it if we had already discussed it before, and then we just got up down on the ground and just yeah. So yeah, that's how we did it. And then after a session or two of those and like exploring what we wanted or what we exploring, we would get together and talk about like, oh, doing this was really cool, this really felt right, or oh, this felt right, or oh, can we do this thing too, or this thing that we did, like that thing where she's on my back, we did when we were exploring falling and flying.
Yeah.
The one where we jump off the cabinet.
We were like, oh, works better.
Yeah, we were like, it doesn't fit here, but there's like this notebook that I keep, and so like write down in our notebooks for later, and then we're like, oh, that really fits this poem now. So
Yeah, so we would like explore and it would be messy, and then afterwards we would step back and like pick out, kind of craft it based on the free exploration,
Yeah.
shape it, so
And
it was a
then-
set.
And then we'd, well, for two of them, we would show them to our advisor, who's Patricia Skarpinski, who's our movement teacher, and she would give us feedback on it and say, oh, this moment feels fuzzy, and this moment like is very clear.
Christie, you should breathe more.
Both of you should breathe more.
I feel like I got that a bunch. I'm like,
Breathe.
I guess I don't breathe.
Well, it's like it's funny when you're not
Apparently
speaking,
that's-
like you forget to really like fill up because you don't have to fill up to speak. So you're just like kind of chilling with your, yeah, it's very shallow. And so if it's not deep breathing, really nothing comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was interesting. So,
Do you have any questions? I was gonna say the first one, but I couldn't.
No real questions. Although, personally, I think I'm still a little unsure about the poems, just because when they first happened, there had been so much silence up to that point. When it came out, I was unsure. Hearing the poem, it makes sense. It works. I understand that, but it just felt out of place.
yeah, it's interesting you say that because the first poem is me speaking.
Right.
And it's really weird because some nights, most nights don't feel like starting to speak. And it is out of place and weird. And so it's like, and I've been trying different things and like that ending of that movement piece has changed so many times because it's like, yeah, after you leave. Yeah. We've never seen each other do this stuff, so like when I'm in the cabin, I have no idea what she's doing outside. Like we've never seen them, so there's your secret. But yeah, it does feel like we're still trying to figure out how it comes out of it.
I think part of that, like, that strikingness of suddenly speaking after being silent for so long, the fact that it's kind of jarring in a way, I think is kind of interesting because that was a big intention to separate them. So that's like interesting that it's like, yeah, jarring to switch, after we've held silence for so long.
That's what we were also talking about them as being like two different languages essentially, because like movement is a language in and of itself and you can communicate through movement, but speaking is English, it's a language. So yeah, like switching between languages. So all of a sudden someone's speaking English and they switch a language, you're like, sorry, what?
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Yeah, that's interesting. Still trying to
Something
figure
we were
it out.
talking about yesterday, of the thing of privacy.
Oh,
So that-
yeah. Like that there are some words that exist in some languages that don't exist in others. Like I don't know if you guys are bilingual at all or if you speak a second language, but sometimes people talk about, oh, there's a word for that in Spanish, but it doesn't exist. And like I'm trying to translate it. Ooh, it doesn't quite exist, but it's like, and then they describe it and it's like, oh yeah, we should have a word for that because I know exactly what you're talking about. And so that's what we feel like movement and language being two different, movement and speech being two different languages, that there are words in the movement vocabulary that don't exist in the speech vocabulary and vice versa. So like there are some things that words can't describe that movement can capture, and there are some things that words can describe that you don't know how to, you wish you could use a word because you're like, and like, so part of that kind of that line of like how do you describe an experience best? Is it better suited to movement or is it better suited to speech,
And we were talking also about, like in Russia, they didn't have the word privacy, so privacy did not exist. Like if something doesn't have a word, it doesn't exist. And there's that power of language. And so like to be able to use your movement to communicate, and we were trying to figure out how we can use more and explore a concept through not just words, but through movement so that maybe new ideas and concepts could come out of it. Was kind of the thought.
Yeah, because like just because we don't have a word for something doesn't mean it might not exist.
Did you feel that it was you tonight up there, or that you registered that she was her, or is it something else inside of you or inside of her? Do you recognize her on stage, or is it? Sorry, I was worded
No, I totally know what you're saying. I think for me, I definitely feel like I'm me every time up there, and I feel like she's her, but I feel like we're very different people every night. Like in the sense that me today and what I went through today makes me a different person right now than me yesterday and what I went through yesterday.
Yeah.
And the day before, like on Thursday night, we had gone through a full day of school. So like school came in and like and our class ended an hour before we started the show. So like that Caitlin is very different than the Caitlin
The
that
weekend Caitlin.
or the like the stressed out Caitlin. Was very stressed yesterdays and like freaking out all day. So freaked out Caitlin was freaked out, you know, was kind of the starting point. Not even freaked out, but just like an emotional high. Whereas like today we didn't have school, we didn't have to get up at 8 a.m. Like slept in, so that might contribute to this like weird dream like state that we had. But like a relaxed, like finally a like for a second even. Like, you know, like the person you are on Saturday night is not the same person you are. You
But
know,
it's still you.
on Thursday,
Tuesday morning.
Tuesday morning, right? You know, yeah. So but it's still you. So it's like, yes, I'm here every night, but also like the people I'm speaking to every night are different. Like yesterday, my priest was here, and so like the program talk about gay marriage because I go to a Catholic church was completely different than it was any other
I know.
night.
I was taking the books and I was like, you were terrified.
I was like freaking out.
It's okay. It's gonna be okay.
I was like, just give me
Take
the
it.
books, just give me the books.
I can take it.
Or like knowing, or like, because it's very different because the people who sit right around here, I can see who they are. So it's like, you know, and if I know who they are, I know if what they believe in, or I know like someone who's gay sitting right up front, as it was on Thursday night, who I know and love. I won't say right now.
Tell me later.
Okay.
I think I remember who's going.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. It will make saying gay marriage or someone who is like speaking to my mother about something is going to be different
Oh,
than
I
speaking
know.
to, or speaking to you about something is going to be completely different. Or like, you know, the moment we opened the cabinets, or just the fact that no one was saying anything or laughing at all tonight was like,
And it wasn't because I could tell they were with us, but it was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
a really different energy.
it was really different. And so like,
There was
no, there was giggling. I'm not saying
You were the biggest giggler.
I'm not. No,
You
I
were
heard,
our
I
standard
heard
of the
some
place.
giggles. I'm not saying that. I was like, you sucked. You didn't laugh at all.
No,
Like,
it's just a really
it's not
different-
meant to be funny or not funny, but it was just different. And so it was like, still there? Or like, sometimes it was like, haha, look at you. You're so serious. Like sometimes that's how I felt like when I opened those cabinets, I was just like, they're so serious. Ha oh hi. You know, so it was like completely different. Like a different me is gonna come out if the people are laughing or not, which is something I realized tonight. Like,
so true.
and it was funny, cause like different thing. Yeah, it was just so. That's the one thing I was like, it's so
Yeah.
different tonight.
It is different, and one of the ways, Alex Galvin is a teacher in our first drama class, but he was talking about one of the ways you can tell if you had a good performance or a bad performance is how well, not how well you remember what you did, but how well you remember what your partners did. Which, you know, I think that show, I mean, for me, and I feel like for both of us, but we always speak for each other. I'm trying to break that habit.
We're trying.
Me and I think both of us. I feel like this show has helped me enormously on that front to be completely in tune. Because when you're doing a two-person show, they're all you have to hold on to a lot of the time, and they're so different every night. And if you ignore that or fail to take that in, that's huge. You know.
Just the fact that like we have the same structure every night essentially, but there's a possibility for change.
Absolutely.
And I think that like this show has made me learn so much about acting in general, like in regular scenes, because like the fact that there is a structure but it can change, or even that coming on, I was like,
That's a character in its own.
yes,
And the kills.
yeah, I was like, someone's here, this is weird.
This is cool.
It was so bizarre, and
It's
tonight,
part of the soundstage.
yeah, and
Oh,
tonight it happened when I opened the door, and it was like,
Yes, oh my God,
and I was
it was
like,
so terrifying. It was so
Tell
terrifying.
me about the clank. Wait, that was cool. When we were in the Evansville house, it was like clank. There was this cool sound. We were rehearsing. I'll just tell them.
I know you will.
Like, tell me. She knows.
Tell them,
Tell them. No, okay. So we were rehearsing in the Evansville house. There's this really cool, it's this big open, like indoor gym thing. And when we were doing the voice one where she had the blindfold, she would like whistle, and then there would be this clang echo every like few minutes. It was really cool. It was like this metallic, super amplified heartbeat, and she'd be like, it would be like clang. It was cool sounding. And we were like, how can we replicate that? But we just had to let it go.
Yeah, but it has like every space has its own soundscape, which is so interesting. Yeah, and like today when the door opened, I was just like,
I'm not going.
It's like a scary movie.
I was like, let's go.
Did you realize that happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. When I went to open the door when she was on the other side of it, the thing above went, and I was like,
Oh, right then. Oh.
like right then. It was so weird.
Oh, that I loved that scene because just before it, there had been someone talking about their fear of the dark,
Yes.
and rather than their fear of the dark, what was in the dark. And you came out like a child, and you were opening the door, and I was like, I know what this feels like. I know what this is. And she was backwards like some kind of creature, and I was like, oh my
Yeah,
god.
that was cool.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was really great.
Beckoning backwards. It was just like,
Yeah, and everything was
like
reversed.
I'm in a sweater.
It was, that's one thing that was so cool was that the way we got the interviews was we sent out messages to the whole school and we said anyone who can please come and we made like 7 to 10 questions like what do you think about love, what are you most afraid of,
What's your most embarrassing story from college?
yeah, like random things and also things that kind of went along with different themes we were playing with.
Yeah, so that then we can pull out, like, when they talk about fear, we can pull from that. And I liked that we had those interviews a lot because I feel like it was just, and what I liked about it, almost aside from the play, was it was just a forum for people to talk to each other and discuss things that meant things that were important to them, you know?
We didn't realize how much, like Jake, as our sound designer, Jake Harper, and he was saying, like, I didn't, like, thank you guys for letting me do this because I didn't realize, like, how cool it would be for me, too, because to sit there and, like, really have a conversation with someone.
Yeah. So like, what are you most afraid of? Like, that's a deep conversation starter.
Yeah.
Someone's gonna answer honestly, which all of our interviewees were very honest.
Yeah, and it was so cool because, like, a lot of the things that they said were things that we also feel and things that went so perfectly with ours. Like, her saying that she felt like an infant, and then we had already written infants in progress, or infant adults in progress, as the last thing that ends our show. We were just like, what? She just said the word infant?
Synchronicity.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you guys pulled from that.
No.
You
One
were
of-
first.
You weren't the ones who chose the snippets?
No,
No,
Jake, our
Jake's-
sound
Jake's-
designer.
yeah.
Wow, he's really good.
Perfect.
He's really
What's
good.
going on?
Yeah.
So we were lucky to have him.
I mean, he has, like, our homes, but
I was agreeing because I've worked with Jake in the past and definitely knows.
he knows what he's doing.
He's really good.
Yeah.
You did almost make, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
he did almost me, and he's doing
He's like everything, but he's like the one sound guy in his department.
What?
He's really like the one only sound guy in his department,
He
so.
can do it all.
Yeah, it was really an interesting experience with those. And then I found myself, like, we were all talking, like, oh, this is my answer for these questions. Or like, oh, so it was really cool.
It's a conversation going. Because, like, the
Yeah.
first time we listened to them, I was like, oh, you know what I'm really afraid of? I have this mirror in my room that freaks me out.
Yeah, and then we went on and like, oh, I have that thing too. And we were like, oh, because another thing we've been worried about with the show is like, we don't want it to sound pretentious and we don't want it to be like, look at us, we're doing art. Because like, it's our words, it's our movement, it's like, so it's from us, but we also, was one thing I think both of us were talking about, was that, like, why are we doing it, you know, and it can't just be for us. And so we were saying, but we do think it's important to do, and why is that? And we were talking about how alone we always feel in things that we go through, and how alone everyone always feels. But if there's a million people that feel alone altogether, you know, we're not alone. And so, so something we were talking about was how that we are just 2 tiny people in this huge sea of everyone. Not just who goes to NIU, but people around the world, and people our age, but also as we were doing it, and I was realizing that these things aren't things that you solve by the time you're 22. You know what I mean? Like, so it really encompasses what a lot of people feel and think, and so we really wanted to do the interviews to kind of open it up and have people hear more than just the 2 of us, and then feel free to think of their stories too.
Everything that was said was very relatable.
Yeah.
Like, it was very open for me personally. I don't know about everybody else, but I mean, everything that was said, or all the movement
beginning and the journey in there at the end.
Yeah, I know, I
Oh,
feel
yeah,
like,
I-
it's like being Caitlin.
Where are you?
I'm
No, I was
graduating.
thinking that too.
Okay, so you're,
I'm at the
It's
end.
true, do
But I'm
show, you won't regret it.
I'm all right.
Are you junior now, or?
No, I'm a senior. I'm
Michael
graduating.
senior.
Marley's a
That's right.
I'm leaving this semester.
Are you really?
Yeah. I'm out of here
This
in
is
2
the end
weeks.
of my.
oh.
What?
Yeah.
It's the
Way to
end
drop
of
that
era.
bomb.
That just scared me a lot.
I've known for quite some
Yeah,
We were in Les Estrada together, so
it's-
I kind of know it.
For quite some time.
I still haven't quite accepted it that I'm leaving in 2 weeks either.
That's so crazy.
And where are you going?
That's scary.
Home. I live right outside of Chicago, so
Okay,
I'm just starting to live at home and work at theaters in the city.
have you got anything lined
Nothing
up?
lined up yet.
What are you auditioning or are you like?
I'm going to try to audition, see if I can make it as an actor first. If I can't find stuff, I'll start looking at tech stuff, and if things go bad, I might look back at school.
That's
Many
cool.
options.
Yeah.
The world is huge.
We're like jumping from this, having it now.
Okay, well,
I love it, that's exciting.
That scared me. That's the jump. People are all jumping in. No, don't jump, don't.
I know, like,
I haven't jumped yet. I haven't jumped yet.
wait, let's all jump together. We're not. People are jumping in December. I'm getting too literal with it. Wow.
We're all jumping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is true.
That's true.
You're jumping, like right now too. I'm jumping.
Yes, sure.
Jeez.
We're jumping.
Often.
What?
We're jumping.
Totally. I feel like this whole
We're kinda
program is
standing
all
up.
perpetual jumping.
Jumping. It's just the fall.
You're just like, what?
What?
So how does theater live in a world of television? Because theater is all about vulnerability, especially theater training. And so much of the world doesn't have any clue what their voice is, what their body can do, what their heart can do, what their brain can do, and they don't want to.
You know, that's why I feel like coming to this program and going through all of that and being, like, my eyes were open and my body was open and my heart was open. And I almost feel like, not a missionary, but I kind of want to give that to other people, you know, and I don't quite know how, but to, like, to help other people find that for themselves. And I think the way, I don't know, I think the way to do it is to walk the walk, you know, to live that way.
I think also, this is something that's been huge for this show for me too. It's just like, I'm terrified for this show. I've been really scared, and like, it was funny because there was one point at which we were,
I was surprisingly zen about it. I was
yeah,
like,
we were
it's
in a
good.
rehearsal, and she's
She's like,
we were waiting on some tech stuff, and she was at the edge of the stage, and I was just like talking about how scared I was, and I was like, "You're not scared, are you?" And she was like, "No, I'm okay." I was like, "Okay." So a huge part of this show, and I think of lots of things with vulnerability and fear and theater and life, is that realizing that it's okay to be afraid.
yeah.
Like, it's okay, like, that doesn't mean that you have to be immobile or you have to be so scared that you can't move, that you can still move while you're scared, and that vulnerability and strength is so much more strong.
Yeah.
It's something that I think this program and this show just comes up again and again. Because you're right, like, theater can't happen if it's not good theater.
Yeah, and the thing about vulnerability, I think that's huge. And I like, throughout this process, I started writing down things that, like, what's really vulnerable for me. Like, getting up on stage and, you know, saying lines is not vulnerable for me. Being the first person to say I love you to someone would be really vulnerable. Like, what does vulnerability mean, you know, throughout your life? It doesn't always mean, you know, getting on stage and doing something way out there, which it is sometimes. But sometimes it's other things, and that people that aren't actors, you know, face too.
Yeah, that reminds me of also like accepting that some moments are a 10 and some moments are a 3, but it doesn't mean that any moment doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, and that's something that also this show I think has done for me in terms of my acting work, is like not worrying that you're not at a 10 all the time.
Yeah.
That you
are enough.
Yeah.
That was funny because that's what I remember being in the cabinet the first night before our opening night, and like you can hear the audience coming in because we're in the freaking cabinets. So we can hear like the voices talking, and it's like, oh, okay, Gelman is here. Like, you know, like the head of our school is here now, and like this person's here, and like you can hear them, and it's weird because there's also the voices. So it's like the future and the world is if I open these doors, then they're there. But if I stay like this, then
It's
they're
so
not.
safe and cozy.
And you're like, and it gets really warm inside there because you're like closed in this little cabinet, which I should cry because I broke it tonight. But
I think it is.
I know there was one moment the last time I was like, boom, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay. I think I pushed out the back of the cabinet during the show tonight.
Hostility. There was hostility.
Yeah.
Just like,
I threw the paper. I was like, no, I'm not giving it to you anymore. There was hostility. Remember that? Remember when I like threw it off the stage?
I kicked it off the stage.
I threw it down and you kicked it. And I was like,
Yes, I do remember.
that doesn't usually.
No, we never kicked the paper off the stage.
Sometimes it's
I
different.
was pissed at you tonight. Yeah, during that first one. That's right. The
You
first
could
one.
tell, like, just in your hand movement, you're like, give it to me. I was like,
Because usually I'm like, yeah, and usually I'm like, come back, and today I was like, fine, don't come back.
Who needs you?
Okay, you're back, right? It was like, it was weird it took longer to start the poem tonight than usual, I feel like. Also, pre-show felt like a million years tonight. And
I fell asleep and woke up and fell asleep and woke up. So yeah, it felt like a very long time. Yeah, it's true. But like probably only for like a couple of minutes each time.
It was really bizarre though, because I felt like each one of these things adds. All I keep thinking about is how different tonight was, and like, then of course the actor self is like, does that mean it was bad tonight? Does that mean it was good? Like, but like it is what it is, and it was
be
honest.
honest.
So and sometimes it's hard to be honest to know what that means. To not cop out of yourself and be like, I did a good job when maybe you could have done better, but also not value the fact that tonight felt like a dream and less like an emotionally high roller coaster. I mean, it was.
I think it was honest. I think it was different because we were honest about the fact that we felt different too. So it's different. Pretty sure it's
did you feel like the show in its entirety was strung together, or was it kind of more like little vignettes? Or because I'm struggling to figure out what I feel the show was, if it was kind of this fluid thing, or if it was here.
That's kind of how it started when we developed it. We would look at one poem and then we would jump over to a different poem and we would look at a different poem. It was only a couple weeks ago that we started running it as a sequence and and then that sort of more strung together feeling sort of emerged. But I think that the fact that you sense that there's kind of some strung together, what you said, that is kind of how we developed it. But once we started running it as a 1 hour thing, it started to affect all the pieces because the poem before would affect the next one.
It's interesting because like the first ones we developed together were the one with the blindfold and the one where we jump off the cabinets. So like it's so funny because we developed those together, and I remember feeling like those two felt very similar. And then the next two that we did like, because what we would do is every few weeks we would work on a different group of two, one of mine and one of hers. So we'd work on and we'd switch off our rehearsals and develop them. And then when we thought we had something together, we would move on to two more. And so each group of two felt like it was very similar. And so it felt like, oh, these are a pair, clearly these are a pair. But I completely forgot until we just started talking about it just now that they felt so similar because they are so different. And I think that you're right, like it's hard to tell if the only thing is like it did feel like separate things when we were rehearsing them, but I think because they're all different sides of me and like different sides of us, that the common thread through the whole thing is it's still me. It's that thing where you feel like a different person with different people, but it's all still you. So that's what it kind of feels like, at least to me, is that it's like that they are separate pieces, but tonight it felt actually more so one whole, I think, than other nights have.
Yeah.
there was like an atmosphere through the whole thing that was similar. Whereas other nights, sometimes the atmosphere of one is like completely different than the atmosphere of the next one. This is interesting. Yeah, it's so cool. I'm like, that's a good question.
Were all the poems recent, or have they been like pretty life?
When we originally started doing this, we were sophomores. We started writing poems and thinking about doing this show. We were sophomores. And we didn't end up using any of the poems from when we were sophomores, did we? And we were like, these are going to be the show. And then most of them
I don't think we really thought it was going to be a show until last year.
Okay.
But we were like, we wanted to share our poetry with each other because we were like, oh, do you write poetry? I write poetry.
We were
But I
very
didn't want
shy.
to tell anyone, and I didn't want to show anyone. So if
I'm
you don't tell anyone,
self-conscious about it.
and so like we were like, but I'm not like a professional in it. Neither am I. Okay, good. So like we never had shared it with anyone. So like we've both been writing poetry for a really long time. But like for me, are the first two that you hear as we're coming out, those were written our freshman year. Those were our freshman year voice poems.
Because Patricia assigns us to write voice poems our freshman year about like what your voice is, was, will be, you know, past,
Yeah.
future, present, your voice, and she has you write a poem about it. So we put those at the beginning to like show like that's what we wrote this freshman year. But most of them were more recent.
Yeah.
This fall or over the summer.
For me, the one that we read by candlelight was written sophomore year. Yeah, because originally it was looking back at who I was last
Yeah, I
year,
remember that.
and then I realized that it was I added to it this year and edited it this year and made it, but it was that same general feeling of looking back at the past self thing and realizing who I am now. And that when I wrote it, I thought that I really did question and do what I thought was right. I really did dance in the rain, but no, I didn't. And now I think I do. So it's like, it was interesting to see again. So yeah, that one was sophomore year. There was the one with the books I wrote 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. That was the newest one.
That was the newest one, which was because I was at church and they read the bishop's letter about gay marriage and it like sent me into a spiral. And I was like, I need to write. I need to, Christie, can we add this in, please?
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, let's do it. Okay.
But how cool was that? Because that like served the purpose of theater. And as I said here last night with the priest and the missionary and the youth director from the Catholic Church, the same ones that had her on the phone.
I was like, Mom, I just got out of church and the bishop said this, and I don't want to believe here anymore.
You know, and it really was cool afterwards at the talk back because they all saw the value, and you had talked about like the things that we're afraid to say, we're afraid to have our voice, but yet we should have our voice. It's because it's who we are and it's how we explore. And they agreed and they loved that whole idea.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you had your voice when you read the bishop's letter on the altar and told us what we should think. But I have a voice too, and this just gave me a platform to be able to share it. And they were appreciative of that. It was cool.
Yeah, it was really,
It's very cool.
I'm still processing it, but it was very telling for me too, because I know like 2 weeks ago I didn't want to go to church anymore there. I didn't want to have anything to do with a place that could be that hurtful and that mean. And it's kind of been eye-opening to me that I did say those things and they stayed for the talk back and they didn't get angry like I did. And that they didn't say a word about it, but you could tell they had heard it. And they asked questions, but they didn't say I don't agree with you, and they didn't say anything about my opinions and things. They asked, the priest said that he thought we should do it every 4 years for ourselves and come back and see where we are again. Which actually was funny because someone else told us, TC told us on Thursday night the same thing. But they didn't say anything about what I thought they were going to say. And that opened my eyes more about the fact that maybe that's not what it is at that church. Maybe that's not what it is. And like there are people like me who believe the same things. So that was very telling, very kind of astounding to me. And then the priest complimented and said that, you know, he hears stories like that all the time, and this was our way of telling our stories, and that it was very universal. And so that was really good for me to hear, at least, so that I can, you know, I might go and ask and talk about this now because they were so open and caring.
They listen, like they weren't just
Yeah.
telling, like they were listening to them.
Yeah, and I thought it was gonna be so awkward and scary.
And it was really, yeah, I don't even know.
Well, can you break down the basis of like these stage process? I kind of catch on, we want to make sure everyone's getting the right, so is that way possible?
You mean like break down
What?
the scenes?
Yes.
Okay.
So I want to see if I got
Sure.
it or not.
We can
It's major theme.
major themes.
Just a major, not just
Putting it
details,
on paper.
yeah.
Sure.
My what?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one, when we were coming out of the cabinets, you know, when she says, I was a fish that thought my fishbowl was the ocean, that sort of seemed like the theme of that one for me, and that was one thing I really thought of.
What's something that the other thing is that those particular poems that were being kind of overlapped at that section were written our freshman year that we were here. So that was kind of like
Emerging into the,
for us. That's what we felt anyway.
the second one was love, basically.
Yeah. That one was done. That one was the one that had all the clothes and the paper and stuff. Because we were like, I was twirling around with the idea of what love is, and clearly have no idea, and we didn't solve it. We were in the room for like 3 hours moving, and we were like, just had things everywhere, and then we were like, okay, well, rehearsal's over.
Can't figure out
solved.
you know.
So yeah, there were obviously different things specific within that, but the idea itself was kind of about love and wanting something you also don't want, and kind of like this push and pull paradox thing.
The second, or the one after that with the blindfold, was about the voice, finding one's voice, and not only your literal voice, like, but like also your voice, like what you have to say in the world, and feeling at odds with your own voice, and kind of discovering how to use it and how to you know, come to peace with it and have it, you know.
Which actually was really interesting, at least for me, because it was actually her poem. But as we went along, having this feeling of like infancy, like not being able to see and the lights being really bright and you don't want to touch the ground and you just want someone to hold you, is also a common thing with voice. And I think that, like, literally until this week, I didn't realize until, you know, she opens the cabinet and I was like, so all of a sudden I was like, I feel like a baby. So that was interesting, kind of like an interesting thing that happened for me with that one. And then the one after
With
that,
all the books, where she's pounding the books on me. Were you talking about that one?
that one was pretty much what it was. Kind of the futility of being.
Feeling like as a student, you're so bogged down with,
You're carrying a million things.
yeah,
just
and you want to change the world, but darn it.
But you know, you're into Calvin, corn. so there's that. And then the one after that was the one with the Cheetos, the Fat Man,
And skinny.
which for the way it was written was kind of the idea that if you don't practice being in love, well, what if you forget how to be in love if it's been so long, type of thing?
Yeah, it's like your heart can get out of shape almost.
Yeah, that the same way that a muscle can atrophy, that the heart can have atrophy in it as well.
And it's easy to be lonely, and it's comfortable to be lazy and single, and you know, not comfortable. I mean, it doesn't feel great to be like enormous, but it's kind of comfortable. I don't know.
We're getting worse, and then the one after that was the one with all the black stuff.
Fear, addictions, escapism, kind of the dark side of going through college. You know, some of the dark things you can stumble into, and the ways people escape.
and we were talking about like, it's not like, obviously we are all at a college campus and we know how much drinking and how much partying goes on, and like when that point hits a scary point, and that not a lot of people know, but one of the signs that you're an alcoholic is that you black out, and people black out like every weekend, and they're like, oh, I didn't remember anything, and it's like, that's like a big deal, actually, bigger deal, I think it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's not to say none of us have ever had a drug of alcohol in our systems or anything like that. But yeah, just kind of opening a conversation about that, because it's something that we were both feeling like somebody offhandedly was like, oh, I'm drinking tonight, and they're like, because college has basically accepted alcoholism, and I was like, wait, that's true. And so it was kind of just interesting.
It's an intense, I think it's a really intense 4 years. And sometimes it's just, and people have different ways of escaping from how intense of an experience it is, and kind of, because it's so much to take in.
And that's the other thing, is like we were talking about ways people can escape, and it's not just the fact that people escape with like drugs and alcohol. What I do is I jump into my books. Like, I work really hard and I study and study and study so that, and then occasionally I'm like, wait, I'm not experiencing the world around me. And so it's kind of that idea that
Things you can lose yourself in.
yeah, and where the boundary is, and where you can still crawl back from it, and where you're essentially a lost cause, or if there ever is a point where that happens.
And then the next one, sorry, no. Okay, sorry. The next one where we jump off of cabinets at the end, and there's the pictures. Caitlin wrote that poem sophomore year, I think, and it's basically
it's kind of like a look, like what if, at least for me, the way it was, which we have very different ideas of what this one is about for each of us, is that looking at, like, if the person that you were 3 years ago or before some significant event happened, like if high school you walked in the door, and like how bizarre that would be, and what you would do with high school you, and you're just like, go away, but you're me, but I don't know. So it was kind of exploring that idea, and exploring the idea that that you both have to let go of the past, but also it's a part of what makes you you. And so that's something also that theme was kind of realized throughout the run.
That's what I got. That's pretty much what I thought.
Yeah.
It's not so different.
Okay.
And then the jumping and the jumping is sort of, I mean, those of us that are seniors know this feeling, is that your toes are curling on the edge of the cliff and you're like, okay, about to jump. It's, it's like when you're skydiving and, 2 weeks before you're like, I'm going to go skydiving, it's going to be awesome. And then, wow, I'm about to jump out of the plane right now. It's that difference. It's like when you're a senior, you're really about to jump, and it's exciting / terrifying / one and the same thing.
And that's kind of where it started, and then it also morphed into like, well, everybody jumps every day with different things, whether it's like asking somebody out, or it's, taking a class that you're terrified to take, or
standing up for yourself in a situation that's...
Yeah, and so just exploring like that moment of jumping, and where fear and excitement are kind of the exact same thing. And so yeah, that's kind of what that one was. And then the last one,
where we're walking forward,
that's recorded, it's both of us, we wanted to figure out kind of how to tie it together at the end. And we decided we didn't want either one of our poems to be to be just our poems, and so we we got into a room and we started moving, which is how we started all of them. But usually we took the poem first, read it, got it inside of us, and then started moving in a room, and whatever came out, came out.
Yeah.
But
and with this one, we moved first and then took that and wrote the poem, which was usually we wrote the poem and then translated it into movement. And in this case, we moved first, like, what do we feel about the future? What do we feel about, leaving school and the future? And we moved first and then wrote a poem based on movement. So it was kind of a reverse there.
And it was together rather than the other ones that had started out as one person's, but
yeah,
figured out how to own it together. It started out owned together and carried on. So that's kind of
rundown
of what just happened in our brains at least. But like, if you're like, that's not what I thought that was about at all, please tell us,
Yeah,
because
that's
that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember a part in the fear piece where you were formerly monkey barring across. What happened to the monkey bars?
Ah. Oh, you're gonna make me talk about this. Okay. Well, we are bad, stupid actors, is what happened. Previously, when I climbed up on the door, I grabbed onto the grid and monkey barred across the grid, and then dropped down on Christie, and not on Christie, but next to Christie, kind of what you saw, and then rolled, and that was all the same. So that is very dangerous. Not just for me, but for everyone, because the grid is over all of you two, and that's where the lighting instruments are hanging on to. So that was cut. Because it can only hold a certain amount of weight, and we really should have asked permission a long time ago, but didn't think about it, and we're stupid.
I mean, that's one of the things, since this is our capstone project, like, it's a learning experience about, because we thought, you know, throughout the process, there are just so many things to take into account, you know, permission to do things that you take for granted, or, you know, and so that was another learning experience.
It was one of the biggest, like, I thought I was going to learn about art and theater and stuff, and all of a sudden I was learning about taking responsibility for your actions, and safety, and asking for help for things, and really checking out every single aspect of what you're going to do if you're going to do anything like this. And I think that happened on Friday during our run, as in 2 days ago, and learning about how to really, when it happened, it was not pretty, and learning how to deal with that, and owning up to it, and going in and apologizing and apologizing and apologizing.
Yeah. You know, that's, if you wanna, you know, I know that Paula and people do like self-employment in the arts things, and that whole side of it, producing your own work, and, you know, being able to do that, and that's just another lesson in, you know, you have to be really safety conscious.
And realizing, like, you don't even know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So all that, like, you just need to ask
Did not occur to us.
cautions
Did not occur
before
to
you
us.
do anything.
Yeah.
Which is a huge lesson, and the faculty here are amazing and are not afraid to teach us the hard lessons, and also make sure we're okay. So that's the summary of what happened to that part.
So great. Ever again.
Yeah, Caitlin.
How did you guys decide what themes you wanted to do, or what poems? Like, were there other poems in the mix, like towards the beginning, that you threw out?
Definitely.
Originally we had these poems, we're like, we're gonna do these ones, and like I had one that was about the shooting that happened 5-6 years ago here, and as we developed it and kept going, the first two we did were the one with the blindfold with the voice, and the one where we jump off the cabinets at the end, and we realized that those things were that we couldn't both do ourselves justice and do this project justice, that this was more about us and how to figuring out your way through growing up, whereas that other piece was more about, like, it needed to serve that, a whole different purpose, and it really needed to be its own thing. So that project has gotten postponed at the moment, and is gonna happen. But right now, yeah, there were all these sorts of, all different poems that we realized that really didn't fit like that. It just didn't fit, and you couldn't put it in there.
Or some of them were really similar. Like, I had a poem about love that was similar to hers. And I kind of figured, like, yeah, we had sort of tackled that, you know. And I feel like we struck a really nice mix of things with the poems we picked, but it was kind of hard to let go of certain ones that were too similar or didn't quite fit, but I think it was for the best.
And we were like, we don't want it to be like super pretentious and super boring and so dramatic that everyone's just like, ugh. So we were like, well, we need some pieces that are a little lighter and a little shorter, and so that's where Fat Man came from, and the Cheetos, and like we were like, we need to like give them some happiness every once in a while, because college isn't just like, it's also, you know, happy sometimes, lots of times. So yeah, that was kind of how that happened. But the way that we went about it was we each took a poem at a time. So it was each of us. We would take, so the first time we took her voice poem and my one where we jump off the cabinets and worked those first. And then when we had gotten kind of a scene or etude as like movement piece together, then we moved on to two more. And so that's how they kind of kept evolving and kept adding on. And then it became a beast. So yeah.
But you guys were your own directors. You were making this whole thing happen.
Yeah, we had a teacher or a professor advisor, because you're supposed to for the honors department.
But she would come to our rehearsals, I think just twice. She would come in and give us feedback and watch and give us feedback, but there was no outside director.
Yeah, which was kind of weird, because then like we really, like I've never seen what happens when I'm inside the cabinet. I've never seen what she does when I'm blindfolded. I have no idea, and sometimes people are laughing, and then I'm like, okay. But like, yeah, like we have no idea what we look like, just how it feels, and it's because there is no director. It is a little different every night.
Yeah.
Like some nights when I pull her up on the cabinet with me, I hug her immediately, and some nights I like push her away, and it's all just where we are each day, and where the audience is, because like some audiences are laughing hysterically, and that makes the show a completely different show than when people are
Doing this.
yeah, being like, oh God. And so, like, I swear to God, every time I like open those and push those cabinet doors open, it's either like, are you still there? Or it's like, yay, or whatever. It's completely different, because like you opening a door on your mom is different than you opening a door on your best friend, than your roommate, than your brother, than your whoever, is completely different. And so that's one thing that was huge, was that since we do have so much audience, not really participation, but like we know you guys,
yeah.
and we're looking at you, and you are who you are, and we are who we are, that it's going to be a different show because of who is there and who we are, whether we've had a full day of school or we slept until 12:30 or or whatever.
Or we went and saw the dance show.
Yes, which was awesome.
It was
So awesome. And that was completely different too, because I was like, wow, beauty, that's different than, and then all of a sudden I was like, I'm beautiful too. And so like, it was a different show, because then it's like whether I'm like, you know, I've had 4 hours of school, or I'm like, oh, dance. Not that all of it was like that, but it was really good. So yeah, it makes you a different person, it makes the audience a different person, and the whole thing is different every night, which is the way theater is supposed to be, and that's what they've been telling us for 4 years. But
It's finally sinking in.
it's like, oh, you're right. You're actually right. Oh, okay.
Did the whole thing turn out differently than you originally planned?
We haven't.
No, we haven't.
Actually, we have
but
not had this question.
Well, because just for me, because I've choreographed before, and sometimes I have a specific idea, and then just because of like the people and the feedback, or like the teachers, or just like personal experiences, like you were saying, like depending on each day, it turns out different. Like sometimes I turn out with a totally different piece, and I'm like, that's not what I had in mind at all, but you know, I like it. It's grown on me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think over the summer, because we knew we were going to do this like last year, over the summer I was thinking about it, and I kind of got some ideas in my head. But pretty much as soon as we started rehearsing, I was like, okay, forget it. I don't know what this is going to turn out like. Pretty much immediately I let go of like my idea of what it was going to turn. Because like we started moving and weird things would come out. Like we're like, let's move and like try to figure out what love is, and then we'd be like, and like hitting things and like angry, and I'm like, well, that's like, you know, it was cute. I was like, I have no idea how this show is gonna get. The day she almost puked.
Dave was trying to
Love
be
is nauseating.
I'm not good at spinning, and so then when I spun, I almost puked a lot.
Her brother's like,
Yeah. Totally thought that was gonna be the next thing happening right there on stage. Just all of it.
There were a couple times that I was like, well, if I puke, I can just go backstage, puke, and come back.
But yeah, I pretty early on in the process, I was like, well, I'm curious to see how it will turn out.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because we came back from Russia, from studying abroad in Russia last year, and we did a lot of movement stuff there, and so we were like practicing a lot of stuff that we learned there last year in preparation for this, and we were like, oh, this is like, how do you fly? And we're like, oh, this is a thing that where I feel like I'm flying, this is a thing, and then we got into the room, and really what we did was just start moving, and nothing like that came out. Sometimes it did. Like there was a moment where I leapt and rolled over her, but it's just so, yeah, like Chrissy said, once we started, it was like, I have no idea what this is gonna be, like at all. And my mom kept asking me like, who should come? What is this? What are you doing? And then she was like, this is what this is like, and posted like on Facebook something of like people with poetry and doing like, I feel. But like, and I was like, no, that's not what we're doing. But then she's like, so what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know.
It wasn't until like pretty late,
Like a couple weeks
that I was like,
ago.
oh, I kind of see the shape it's taking.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and I think by allowing it to be whatever it was gonna be, it was both really freeing and also really scary, because it was like, I remember being like, is anyone gonna get it, or are they just gonna be like, ugh, it's stupid, or like anything like that. And there's all those judgments that we as artists and actors and technicians and everything always wonder and think about. And then there was a moment where it was like, well, it is what it is, and there's really nothing we can do about it. And Christy was like, hate is gonna hate, and I was like, yeah, it's true. Like, okay, if you don't like it, that's fine. Like, great,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That reminds me, there was that one piece in the dance show that I was like, what is this? Like
Pendulum when the music stopped?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, and then I was like, I love it though.
And they started talking on stage.
Yeah, I was like,
And it was them. And I was like,
love it
yeah.
though. I did,
Yeah.
I loved it. So I was like, hopefully people are gonna be like, I love it though.
Or like at least think about it.
Yeah.
Cause like,
Food for
yeah,
thought.
food for thought. We were just kind of like, this is what we're doing. And yeah, it's terrifying because it's our words and our baby essentially, which is why today when I got down at the final moment, I just started cracking up because it was like, how did we get here?
I was like,
I know. Because this is the last night we're doing it, like it's done now. So, it's not really done, but it is what it is. At least for now it is, this chapter is over. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We're here till May. So, yeah, and once again, it was a different show because it was the last time, but it's such a weird feeling to be like, how did we get here? Like after our show closes and you're like, that just happened. Or like after you finish something, whether it be college or school or anything that is an event, and you're like,
and that's, I just had that too, like you don't, I mean, even when you're graduating, you don't think like, I'm graduating, it doesn't really hit you until like a certain moment, and you're like, I just graduated from college or whatever, you know.
and I'm that person who that happens to you like 9 months later. You're like, what just happened? 6 months ago. Yeah.
So, any last questions or?
Yes.
No, I'm just curious, how did you come up with the idea of the 2 cabinets? Where did that?
The 2 cabinets, we started our devising and our exploration in the Evans Field House in one of the classrooms, and they have these like wall-to-wall cabinet things where people store their like yoga mats and zafus and workout gear and weights and things like that. And we were moving in there, and you know, we started using the cabinets pretty much every time.
And we were like, wait, this gives us levels, this gives us things to really work with, and then they just seemed right.
It really spoke to us because, you know,
I think if we had done it in here, it would have been a different, like if we had just gone here every day or every time we wanted to work and gone right there where there was nothing, it would have been different.
yeah, or like the pillars would have been used. I don't know, it depends when you're devising, the space that you're devising in has a huge influence, but,
So just like what is around you it makes it completely different. Or the fact that that one day we were using the cabinets and there was a bunch of yoga mats and stuff in there, so we started, that was the one where we explored love and I threw them all on her. And so then we were like, we need things to throw on. Okay, men's clothing, that's better. Okay. So yeah, so it was, so really it was just kind of because that was the space we were working in. And also it was interesting to see how the space affects it, because not just the set, but the soundscape. Like in the Evans Fieldhouse, there's this weird echoey feeling, and it was very like dream, otherworldly sphere.
yeah.
And so that was something that influenced it a lot.
Yeah.
Too.
If there aren't any more questions or
Which is fine.
comments, which is fine, then thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for coming. You guys are awesome. Thank you.